Yay. All right. Awesome. So welcome to New Paradigm Conversations. I'm Sierra, and today my guest is Jess Maitri. This is our second episode, and I'm really excited to be bringing someone new into our community. My goal right now is to really expand the energy and bring new perspectives in this really fertile time that we're in collectively of transformation. And I think it's so important to continue collaborating and reaching our energy out to interact with others, because I'm really finding more than ever right now, the energy is so strong, and our unique frequencies are so important to be seen and shared and supported by each other. So thank you so much, Jess, for joining me today. And I'd just like to do a little intro about who you are, and then you can please, elaborate. I just want to share that you are an LCSW, so that's a licensed social worker, correct?
Yeah, clinical social worker, yep.
Yeah, and you've been in practice since 2010. You're a Phoenix Rising yoga therapist and breathwork practitioner. You blend Eastern and Western approaches to mental health therapy and embodied psychology approaches to healing. You've created Yothera, a psychotherapeutic modality that bridges the gap in mental health and healing professions. And before we kind of dive in, and as we continue to kind of wait and see, I see some people are joining. What is Yothera, and what exactly is that modality that you're talking about that you've created? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, sure. So Yothera is, it's basically my trademarked modality. It's still kind of in the process of finishing up, but the reason that makes this different is I've been able to get CEUs, which are continuing education credits, for this modality because of my licensure as a therapist. And so that's how this modality is different, as I'm hoping to give resources and tools for people in the holistic health field to not only get continuing education for their schooling credits, but also to be able to bring embodiment and spirituality and newer paradigm type conversations into that world. Yeah.
I love that. I don't think, because we're just getting to know each other now. One thing that I studied in university was environmental science. And the other thing I majored in was, I minored in environmental science, I majored in psychology, and my path was, I wanted to get my master's in social work. So I loved the both. Like my thesis paper for my graduation was environmental psychology, right? I was trying to find these ways to bridge more than just the basic modalities that were being presented, and a more of a connection to, our earth and Gaia. And when I was looking at graduate schools, that was the hardest part, was nothing was speaking to me as far as what I wanted to do and implement. There were a few schools, that were not as accredited, I guess you could say. But that's what really was my hope. I was like, gosh, I wish there was a school that could meet what I was craving to really understand and learn more about, besides what was being presented, like in the DSM manual, these kind of labels. And how can we, really start integrating, especially, and I'd love for you to share about this, what you find in your practice, is a lot of, including myself, I'll vulnerably share. I struggled with depression and mental, whatever you want to say, challenges, disorders. I don't think they're disorders, but a range of labels I was given in my life. I had a lot of trauma. I had a lot of labels, a lot of diagnoses. And what I found as I met others that were going through the same thing, and what I put together later in my awakening, was wow, we are the light workers and the sensitives and the intuitives. And this is part of, I think, learning to navigate that is tapping into so many dimensional frequencies. And how do we integrate that into, or how do we find support and nourishment in that in an empowered way? I'd love for you to just please, take the floor and share on that more if you can.
Sure. Yeah, that's a big topic, isn't it? But beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful that this is happening, because right now I'm noticing that there's more and more individuals that are feeling like they are becoming more multidimensional. And what I mean by that is they can feel really dense one day, and the next day they can feel really light, or they're getting these activation codes, if you want to, whatever label you want to put to it. But if you strictly were going by the Western modalities of the DSM, which is diagnosing, that would potentially fit under some not favorable labels that aren't really inclusive for what we're going through right now as a collective. I believe that there's a lot of awakening happening, and the old models are not accounting for that. They're not accounting for Kundalini awakenings. They're not accounting for these highly sensitive people to be able to fully be who they are without getting a label that actually doesn't fit. And so I'm hoping that more, and I think there's a lot of therapists like myself that are looking for, because the closest thing that I could find to what I'm creating now, which is Yothera, was my schooling as a Phoenix Rising yoga therapist. That was the closest thing that I could find, and that cost thousands of dollars, which it was an amazing training, but there's not something super accessible that also gives CEUs for people like myself that are really wanting to stay connected to both worlds. So, and I think it is important that we stay connected to both worlds, because sometimes people are a little too out there that they can't ground, right? And then there's people that are too grounded and don't have any space for all of it. So, yeah.
It's so powerful what you're sharing and what you're creating. It's such a beautiful example of what I see this new paradigm and the new earth is all about. It's not necessarily like, from my perspective, we're not waiting for this great flash to happen and then we're just going to walk into this blissful new, world of being. This is about recreating and reorganizing some of the structures that have been there. Not everything that is here in our reality is necessarily, let's say, bad or wrong or needs to be completely wiped away. This is about like people like you coming in and again reorganizing and bringing a new essence, a new frequency that's evolving with us in the times. And so I love that, because I think some people feel a lot, I hear even my clients share, that everyone needs to be a channel or, create something completely brand new. And it's even like the teachers or wherever you're working, there's this opportunity to integrate and weave in the values and the inspirations and the frequency of new earth. And so I love that, like, this is what you're doing. That's incredible, absolutely incredible. So so let's move on and kind of bridge that into, I'm curious about what brought you to being a quote unquote, let's say, therapist slash space holder, slash shaman. It's usually, I know for myself, as I've shared, because of the challenges that I went through or the suffering or what have you, I wanted to, of course, it's like this empathy, and I wanted to hold that space or provide, a space of comfort and compassion for others. And I kind of want to start weaving this into, you know, what brought you to where you're at now, and also how we can tie that into, well, let's just start there. Sorry. Let's start how you got to where you're at now. Yeah.
Oh, let's see. I'll keep this answer as short as I can, but I'll just start with, long story short, I grew up LDS, which is Mormon. And so obviously not anymore, but the reason I bring that up is because I went to school at BYU, and one of the only professions that, you know, as a woman, that I felt like I could do and still stay kind of relatively in that, that paradigm, was to go into either teaching or social work, because after 4 years you can get a job that kind of pays and you don't have to go to school anymore after that. Well, long story short, I ended up leaving that religion and everything else that came with that, and stepped into just fully being a therapist, which meant that I went further than that. I went to get my master's, and then I also did the 2 years after that for the clinical supervision, and got the clinical license. And the reason I did that was from the same reason that you're speaking of, which is my heart wanted to help. And I think this speaks to a lot of people that are in helping professions, because most people that go into helping professions really do it because they want to be of service. But what ends up happening is they get something called compassion fatigue, which is a pretty big term. I'm sure everyone's heard that term, right? But it's such a big thing because the people that are on the front lines are not actually getting the support that they need. And then now more than ever, those people are the ones, because they are a little more empathic, they're the ones that are maybe starting to feel multidimensional and don't have the boundaries and don't have the support to continue to show up. That's what I'm noticing. And so I resonate with that. And the reason that I started to bring more embodiment practices into my work was because I was having compassion fatigue. I started my practice in 2010, and around 2015 or 16 is when I started bringing the yoga therapy into my practice, because I needed to stop talking about the stories with people, because I was drained. I couldn't show up. And so I needed another approach, which I think a lot of people are needing right now as well, of like, how can I meet and help without absorbing like we do as empaths? How can I show up but not take it on? And so that's part of the reason that I started bringing the body into therapy, was mostly to take care of me and my energy body. So.
Oh my gosh, so much there.
No, I'm sorry, I tried to keep it short.
Oh no, like that's exactly the direction that I wanted to go in, was because when I was reading about, you know, what you do and what your passion is right now, helping the healers in the front lines is what you shared. And I myself as well have gone through that. And it's been an ongoing, constant recalibration and re-evaluation, and how I'm overextending my energy, this needing to untangle what I thought and how I needed to operate and move, and how much I needed to do and produce, you know. Yeah. I've shared this before, like looking on Facebook or looking at others that, for an example, because you know, we all walk into this and we're these entrepreneurs, and it's like, well, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm gonna kind of like look at others, and having to learn very quickly what to take and what to leave behind. And my question for you is, how can we as way showers or space holders or and whatever way we're doing that, continue to, yes, maybe, you know, learn from others, you know, to expand our businesses and all of that, but at the same time honor our unique frequency and the way we uniquely run energy? Because I find that what others can do may work for them and their nervous systems and their meridians and their auric field, but not always mine. Like how long I can be with clients, what exactly like what you're saying, you know, how much do I need to be talking? What's a line for me? And that takes a lot of, well, for myself, I will say, it's been a lot of untangling. it's been a lot of like, I need to get in my own frequency and really find what works for me. Can you share more about that?
Sure. Yeah, I can resonate with that personally as well. I needed to create space to figure out exactly what you just said, like what actually works for me. And, what I'm noticing is more and more, quote, way showers or healers or space holders are wanting that space for themselves so that they can figure that out. And that's, interestingly enough, a lot of what's happening right now is we've been gifted a lot of space to figure out what we like and what we don't like. And I think being able to bring more creativity and space into these more masculine, if you will, like professions is really, really important. I say masculine, non-gendered, but the profession of a therapist most of the time is like you have a diagnosis, you have a treatment plan, and you have an outcome, right? And that's, in my opinion, that's very masculine versus like, how can we just be in our body? How can we just be with what's happening as a way to heal those deeper wounds? So I don't know if that answered the question, but
yeah, that's extremely powerful. The especially that last part you were just saying, the beingness with the wounds, the beingness, I find allows so much of the transmutation to occur naturally, rather than trying to meddle with it in all these ways. It's, yeah. And what, so what is some guidance that you often are giving others that you're working with? Because it sounds like you're working with these healers that are having this kind of compassion burnout, so to speak. What, so you were just talking about the beingness, the creating the space, the creativity. How can we take that leap? How can we bring, this is what's kind of coming through right now. So this is not even coming from me and my guides. They're like, how can you bring the inner child into more of what we're doing? How can it be a little bit lighter, like more playful? Because I know when I'm in that frequency, then I notice the burnout is a lot less too, because how can healing be raw, but at the same time light?
That's interesting you bring the inner child up, because that's specifically what the modality of Yothera works with, is leaving behind, the wounded child into the playful, healed child. And part of that process is helping people to start identifying and making space for what bliss feels like, what joy feels like, because most of us we've just been entrained into a certain way of being that we don't know what makes us lose track of time. We don't have any idea of what brings us joy. Most people that I ask what brings you joy, they don't know, because we've almost lost touch with what that word even means. Like, what does joy mean? What is bliss? And so it's actually just getting back in touch with all of that. And kind of to come back to what you just said about the doing versus being, what I've noticed is the being is where that shows up naturally. If you can create the space to just be, a lot of those answers around what brings you joy, what brings you bliss, those actually just naturally show up. Yeah.
And what would you say to the biggest question that also arises, I know with me and my clients, is how can we step into that space of trust as we reorganize our businesses to this more divine feminine inner child model, where there is more time, that we are slowing down? And I notice for myself, I tend to get more done actually, but trusting that it's of course, it's like the number one thing that arises in sessions is, but how am I going to be supported financially, right? How do we, because it's such a new paradigm thing that we're moving into, this trust that the universe will meet us once we align to that joy, and that beingness allows us to be more receptive, to bring in, what we need to support our journey. Um, what what are your thoughts about that, and how those that are really ready to take that leap? Because I feel what you touched on too, this reset kind of period that we're in right now
Mhm.
is a lot about that. People are really ready to, no matter what it is they're doing, something is shifting, something is changing in how they're doing it, how they were interacting with whatever it was, being a parent, a teacher, a healer, in some way wasn't working, and this is an opportunity to move it into a new frequency that's aligned with the new earth. What supportive comments or ideas would you offer those people that are in that space of transition and wanting that really bad?
Yep, I can speak from personal experience on that, but also like people I've worked with is move slower than you want. And the reason for that is if you move too fast, what tends to happen, if you push yourself out of a steady paycheck too fast, you actually push yourself into scarcity, which blocks joy. You bring in fear, because the reality is, to be most multidimensional means you got to pay your bills too. So you have to be able to say, yes, I have to pay my bills, and I need to start to make baby steps. And if you think of it like from a trauma perspective, this is a trauma term. It's called pendulation. And so what we want to do is we never push somebody past their edge ever in a session, in any kind of treatment that works with trauma. And most of us have a trauma wound around scarcity and fear. And so if you push yourself off the edge too fast, you're actually just inviting it instead of really freeing yourself. A lot of people I've noticed, myself included, will jump too fast into something else, leave the 9 to 5, leave the this or that. But before you know it, you're like, well, here I am, universe, I trusted, but that's not how it works. It doesn't work like
Mm-hmm.
and so we have to learn to actually be able to navigate balance between, we got to pay the bills and we got to show up in a different frequency, like you were saying. So I think it takes a lot longer than people want it to take, but being willing to be patient in that process is really important.
Mm, I really love that. That's so interesting, the trauma edge that you're talking about, and knowing when, again, it feels the inner child so a part of this as well. Like, yes, like pushing ourselves, but knowing when it's coming from a place of forcing rather than flowing, rather than wonderment of like, ooh, what's this next thing? How can I keep expanding? I couldn't agree more with the slowing down and the patience. And I know as light workers, so many, they're like, when, I'm ready now.
Yeah.
And how, for myself, and it's taken time. It's just taken, I always say, it's like, you think, it's the mind and kind of the ego. Like, trust the process. Your higher self's always giving you exactly what you need, because trust that once you come into this role, there's a whirlwind of new things that you're preparing yourself to best interact with, and it's happening at such a perfect pace for everyone. I really love what you shared. Where are we at time? So one more theme, and then I'm gonna kind of look and see, get comments and questions. Oops. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, so for anyone's listening, if go ahead and start to put in your questions if you'd like to ask Jess anything, or myself. And if you can put, last time there was so many, it was hard for me to weed through the questions. If you guys can put like a star or an emoji or something ahead of it, and that can make it easier for me to see. The last topic I kind of want to cover here is about authenticity and vulnerability, and showing up as a some people call it a divine feminine leader, a way shower, whatever it is. But when we begin to step out in this role of sharing ourselves, interacting with more and more people, I still find that there's these very subtle layers of almost, I don't know if guru consciousness is the correct word, but it's very subtle. It's like some courses more overt, but this idea that yes, we're here to be an example and to be inspiring and to bring a sense of high pure vibrational wisdom the best way that we can to share with others, but at the same time, how do we honor our humanness, the parts of us that are still transmuting energy, still transmuting our ancestral lineage, still even just as sensitive souls like myself, transmuting for the collective, still going through these contractions and expansions, honoring the time that we need to have some private time, but also not being fearful to share some of that, share some of what we're going through, and not have it be this idea or this belief that, oh, I'm low vibe because I'm having a bad, a sad day. How do we transform that story, or what are your thoughts about that? How we can show up in a really authentic way, but still be a leader, so to speak.
Oh yeah, I think true leaders are not high vibing all the time, because that's just not for me. That's not being authentic or human. Because, well, for me, again, I'm only speaking for me, but I don't necessarily resonate with leaders who are always in a good space, because it's hard to trust that, because that's not something that I can relate to. So, being relatable is super important. If we want to be a leader or a way shower, it's important that people can relate to us and just talk to us, because we are human. We're actually not above anything. And the interesting thing is about that idea, not that we think we're above anything, but that people teach me more, I think, than I probably teach them, because they are their own master. They're their own teacher. I'm simply there to hold the space for them to let the wisdom come up and out. And I think if more people that are, I guess, claiming to be leaders or way showers understood or talked about that and said, like, it's not me that's teaching you, it's you that's teaching you. I'm just here to mirror it. Then that would change the whole dynamic of what a teacher means. Like, we're leading, but are we? Or are we really just holding space for people to lead themselves?
I struggle with the word leader. I have for a long time. I mean, I get where it's coming from. I like forerunner is a little bit better. We're kind of paving a new way. We're seeing things in a new way, so we're kind of able to take that leap of faith. But leading, I've always struggled with that. I'm like,
who's leading who here? Because we're both blind. So
right. Like, I don't feel like I'm leading when I'm like crying, like on my bed. It's just like, no, I'm just human, and I'm doing this with everyone. And for whatever reason, my field has this assignment. My soul has an assignment to hold space for others to do it with me, really. Yeah. It's and yeah, I've in my journey have had at times people reflect to me, oh, you're sharing too much of you, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because I'm just sharing me. I'm all of these things. I'm all of these things. I can be falling on the floor, literally releasing so much density and tears, while at the same time the next day receiving brand new downloads. And how do we start creating that safe space, or like taking this pressure off the healers, the way showers, the channels to be this thing? How can we how do you feel we can invite others to start showing up and making it a safe place as colleagues, not competitors, to be more authentic?
Yeah, I love that question, because I think the answer that comes to mind is that that's what the sharing is for. Like, I guess I'm hoping that people that listen to you or me, like that are seeing us do this, this is, I think, part of what makes it safer for people. It's like, oh, well, they did it and look, they're still okay. And, you know, it's kind of like breaking down well, if you think about therapists, you know, traditional therapy is the therapist doesn't share anything personal at all. We just sit in the chair and, you know, it's a safe space for us in a way. And I do want to clarify something though, like there are boundaries that are needed to make it a healing space. You know, I don't fall apart in front of my clients because the space is for them, you know? And so just to be clear about that, it's kind of like how we still need to create the container and hold the container, but we don't need to pretend like we haven't been through the same thing. Or it's almost like sharing when it's going to be helpful for them. You know, that's how there's the line there, I guess. Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Creating that space, that's the time that they're investing in, and that's the energy exchange, right?
Right.
They're investing, and we're creating this kind of temple, sacred healing space. Awesome. So let's see what questions are coming through. So we've got Lolita joining us, Daya. Let's see, Lolita has a question. What are a few tangible ways that you have used in holding space for someone, yet not taking on their energy?
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can tell you a really tangible thing, I guess, or ritual that I do before every session, and that's I put up energy boundaries. So there's just a ritual that I go through where I ground to the earth, and then I kind of imagine this energy field where I can receive, and it can still be an exchange of energy, but that only certain energy can actually come into my field. So it's kind of an intention and like a ritual that I've kind of created for myself that I do before every session, including these kind of sessions because energy is still exchanged this way, you know, on Zoom. And really just grounding. I mean, I think that for me personally does so much for keeping my energy clear. Is if I'm connected to Mother Earth, there's really not a whole lot else that can like override that energy. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Lolita. Yeah, as empaths, it's we feel so much of what's going on for our client, and I think it's a practice, and it's, you know, for myself, it's you know, learning, you know, how long can my sessions be, and all kinds of things. It's just definitely been going into it, practicing, learning. The more I investigate and have actually alone time to really like get to know my energy field, I can start to distinguish what's mine and what's not mine, and make adjustments accordingly. But yeah, I love everything you share. That's awesome. So a lot of people are resonating with how it takes time that we were talking about earlier. Let's see. Sylvia's saying, I love when people share some of the difficulties because it helps me realize there's nothing wrong with how I'm navigating the transformation. Yeah, that's a huge piece to that relatability, and not feeling alone, or not feeling you're doing something wrong just because you're having an emotion that is other than ecstasy or joy, or so this feed is frozen. So I think that's good. We're good on time. We're just about a half an hour, and that's usually kind of where I like to contain the energy for myself. Because even these, like you're saying, these conversations, even though we're not holding space, it's like our energies are interacting, and sometimes I can feel that kinetic, that high vibe, and then I'm like, okay, this is about how long I can hold. So again, thank you so much. Is there anything else? I'd like you to also, of course, end this with sharing, you know, how people can get in touch with you, and classes and courses or things that you're offering. But before that, is there any closing thoughts or anything you'd like to just offer anyone that's listening to this?
Well, I'd like to become more familiar with the individuals in your community, so that's on my list. I guess just encouraging more people to share their stories so that we don't feel so alone. You know, I think that's a lot of what this time is doing, is some of this stuff's bubbling up and it has the space to, and so I would encourage people to share more openly, especially about the things that normally you would hide, because that's what's going to bring up some healing for yourself, but others. So.
I love that. I'm a big yes to that. And how can people in my community and whoever else comes across this, I'll be putting by the way all of your information up as well, your website and all the links, but just generally please share, you know, what are you offering right now and how can they find you?
Yeah, I love it. So you can just go to my website is yothera.com. I'm also on Instagram, Yothera Alchemy. And the biggest thing that I would love to do with people is my 4-week online course. So the one in May is actually already full, which is exciting. But there is a wait list, and so that one, the next one starts in June. So if people are wanting to connect with me that way, it offers CEUs, but it doesn't have to be for CEUs. It can really be for anybody that's wanting to bridge psychology and embodiment and all of the wonderful things we talked about today. So yeah.
Awesome. Oh, awesome. Yeah, I mean, what you're doing is amazing. And I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation. And yeah, really touched on quite a few topics in a small amount of time. And it was awesome. So yeah, we're going to sign out and you'll just stay on with me until we close out. But thank you everyone for joining this conversation. And if you have any more questions or comments that come up, just please tag me or Jess in the comments, and we'd be both happy to get back to you. And yeah, just sending everyone so much love and patience and peace, and hoping that you are all finding your beingness in this time of transformation. So thanks again. Mwah.
Thank you.